Thomas Ligotti. The Frolic, Devilry on DVD. Interview conducted by Mark McLaughlin. There are tough dudes, and then there's Chuck Norris. There are sexy blondes, and then there's Marilyn Monroe. There are smart guys, and then there's Albert Einstein. See where I'm going with this? Lots of folks fit into a category, and then there are those outstanding individuals who not only epitomize, but actually transcend their given category. With that in mind, let me add. There are writers of horror stories, and then there's Thomas Ligotti. Ligotti is today's undisputed master of macabre short fiction. His story collections are modern-day classics from Songs of a Dead Dreamer to Grim Scribe, his lives and works to The Nightmare Factory and beyond. His works are noted for their dreamlike quality, surreal and luxuriously detailed. Even the titles of his stories evoke an exotic sense of the bizarre. Consider The Lost Art of Twilight, The Sect of the Idiot, Conversations in a Dead Language, The Shadow at the Bottom of the World, Flowers of the Abyss, Mad Night of Atonement, I Have a Special Plan for This World, and the darkly whimsical, Professor Nobody's Little Lectures on Supernatural Horror. Ligotti took a few minutes from his busy schedule to talk with me about his new short film, The Frolic, as well as his various other projects. Horror Garage, I just watched the masterful short film they made out of your short story, The Frolic. Is this the first time your work has been made into a film? What are the plans for its distribution? Will it play at any film festivals or conventions? Thomas Ligotti, this is indeed the first time any of my stories have been adapted as a film. At this time, I believe that the DVD is available only through direct sale from Wonder Entertainment. The film has already been previewed at several conventions and film festivals. For a relatively lengthy review and further information, click here. HG, what were your thoughts as you watched this movie of your work for the first time? Did you like the performers they picked to play your characters? Thomas Ligotti, I saw the film in several preliminary forms before I saw the final product. Since I was the co-writer of the script with Brandon Trens, I was intrigued as hell to see how it would come out vis-a-vis its direction, acting, production design, and everything else one looks for in any film. As I watched it for the first time, I thought, this looks like a real movie. I know that everyone involved in the production put a lot of work into every aspect of it. I talk about this in the interview included in the book that accompanies the DVD. The performances of the actors were terrific. The two principal actors, Michael Riley Burke and Morrie Sterling, are pros that anyone who watches TV and movies has seen. I remember watching some episodes of the show 24 in which Michael Riley Burke played a character who plots to assassinate the president. And Morrie Sterling turns up often on cop shows. Sterling has such a unique presence, he stands out in any role he plays. In The Frolic, I think he was allowed to pull out all the stops of his abilities as an actor, which is something you have to see to believe. He both embodied and embellished the character of John Doe from my very early story The Frolic. HG, are any more Ligotti movies in the works? Thomas Ligotti, there are some tentative plans, but everything in Hollywood is tentative until an actual movie is released. HG, if you could select any of your past works to be turned into a film, with your choice of director and cast with no worries about budget, which story would you pick, and who would direct it and star in it? Thomas Ligotti, my choice of which stories I would like to see adapted as film is skewed toward what I think would make a good movie of the kind that I myself would want to see and that I can imagine would be makeable without transforming it into another creature altogether. From this perspective, the work of mine that I would most want to see made into a film is my short novel My Work Is Not Yet Done. I would want to see a solid, intelligent, and imaginative director go to work on this narrative, someone like David Fincher, Brad Anderson, or David Cronenberg. Since My Work Is Not Yet Done would demand as much acting and action, these are the first directors that come to mind, since Fincher did The Usual Suspects and Seven, Brad Anderson did Session 9 the best horror movie in recent memory, and Cronenberg has made the bold statement in an interview that to me, the talking head is the essence of cinema, something that he backs up in both his earlier movies like The Dead Zone and Videodrome, as well as his newer movies like A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. Regarding actors, I think Johnny Depp would be great, because he can play low-key normal characters, as he did in the Nick of Time, and whack jobs as he did in Sweeney Todd, both of which would be required for the portrayal of Frank Dominio in My Work Is Not Yet Done. Actually, I think that Morrie Sterling could also do amazing turn as this character. Oh yeah, Morrie Sterling would be great. HG, what other literary projects do you have in the works? Thomas Ligotti, I've been working forever on a non-fiction book called The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, A Short Life of Horror. In Conspiracy I attempt to bind together themes from the works of pessimistic philosophers and horror writers into an exposition on the uncanny nature and ontological fraudulence of the human species. HG, here's the question I'm sure you get asked all the time, when are we going to see a Ligotti novel? Thomas Ligotti, I think it's safe to say that I will never write a novel. The reason is this, I really don't like fiction, and novels are what fiction is all about. The only fictional works that I've ever admired are those which have their formal basis in essays, Borges, poetry, Bruno Schulz, monologues, Thomas Bernhard, or all three, Poe and Lovecraft. I want to hear a writer speaking, not see a movie in my mind that takes days or weeks to get through rather than 100 minutes or the time it takes to watch a multi-part mini-series. Why would anyone want to read The Silence of the Lambs when they could see the movie? A fair response would be, there are more good works of fiction if you like fiction than there are good movies. That's massively true. Good movies are a happy accident. HG, you're a rather daunting personage, you know. What frightens you? What makes you smile? Thomas Ligotti, I never knew that I was a daunting person until people with whom I worked at a publishing company told me I was daunting. Of course, they didn't say that until they got to know me and understood that I was more afraid of them than they were of me. What frightens me? All the ghastly ways in which one can suffer in this world. I think about them all the time and say to myself, I've got to kill myself before something like happens to me. Unfortunately, I'm afraid of dying. Unless I'm in a depressive phase, in which case I'm not afraid of anything. What makes me smile? That brings to mind a sentence from E.M. Siren, nobility is only in the negation of existence, in a smile that surveys annihilated landscapes. I think that if I could walk from one end of the world to the other and see nothing but annihilated landscapes, that would make me smile. I've always thought that I would make a good last man on earth. HG, you rose up through the ranks of the printed small press. How has the internet changed the way writers earn their stripes? Thomas Ligotti, I have no idea. I don't frequent fiction sites on the internet. 20 years ago I would have been all over the horror sites on the internet. One thing I've noticed from the books and anthologies that people kindly send to me is that horror writers are better today than they were when I started writing. I may not care for their work, but I know that it's good, more polished, more imaginative, more everything. Perhaps the internet has had something to do with that, because you have a chance to read so many writers and develop a sense of standards that was higher than it was in the past, at least for short stories. The burgeoning of small press horror publishers no doubt also has something to do with how good horror writers are today. HG, how has the internet changed the way you do business as a writer? Thomas Ligotti, I've never really done business as a writer, unless you mean as a freelance writer and editor. There were a number of jobs I couldn't have done without the internet. HG, where on the internet can people find out more about your work? How involved are you with these online venues? Thomas Ligotti, there's a site called Thomas Ligotti Online, but it's not a personal site in which I have much involvement. It was developed by a gentleman named Brian Edward Poe. Seriously. There's not only stuff about me on the site but tons of music, art, and writing by TLO members. I can actually find out more about myself as a horror writer on that site than I can on my own. If I want to find out what I published, when, and how many times, I refer to Doug Anderson's up-to-date bibliography on TLO. HG, society and technology are evolving at a frantic pace. How is horror, as a genre, evolving to match those changes? Thomas Ligotti, I don't think that horror is a genre that evolves or has ever evolved. I think it develops in a way that parallels the great man theory of history. Every so often a writer comes along who changes the way other writers in the horror genre write. Examples: Poe, Lovecraft, Stephen King. HG, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with the readers of Horror Garage. I'll make your final question an easy one. What are you having for dinner tonight? Thomas Ligotti, leftovers. I like leftovers better than first times. I think that there should be restaurants that serve food made the day before. Like roast beef. Who wants to eat roast beef and potatoes and all that when you can have roast beef hash with everything all mixed together? And how about day-old pizza? End.